Welcome back to the Outdoor Adventures Podcast. I've got with me fill-in co-host Chris Hayden. Welcome back to the program.
Howdy.
My cousin Dylan is the official co-host, and as soon as I gave him that title, he hasn't been able to make it back to the studio. So I think he's waiting for his check, and it's like kind of like a strike situation or something like that. But we've got with us in the studio James Brown IV and Adam Bingham. These guys, salt of the earth, great guys. I call them Coasties. And so in my mind, I thought they both grew up here on the West Coast. And before we got started here, we were talking, and actually I found out James did grow up on the West Coast. But Adam, his dad was born around here, but he actually grew up on the East Coast. And so a lot of people, I don't know how you would define a Coastie, but in my mind, a Coastie is always got a reputation for being a little bit crazy, but also really resilient in being able to get things done when nobody else knows how to do it. So I see them as guys that can just get it done. So, James, do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Well, thanks for the intro, Sam. I don't know about all that, but there has been maybe a misconception that there's such a thing as a crazy coastie. I'll let everybody judge for themselves. I think that growing up on the Oregon coast, a lot of it has to do with being passed down from your parents, especially in my case, my father. He grew up kind of all over the place, but went to high school in Florence and taught himself how to do a lot of things, from hunting to fishing, and passed those things down to me. At a young age, I had little hip waders. Not a lot of people even know what those are anymore. So I was probably a elementary schooler and got a set of hip waders, and my dad took me steelhead fishing up the Coos River. And to this day, he looks back and can't believe he really did take a kid that young without a life jacket on up the river. But it was kind of the way you learn. Today, folks maybe raised in the valley would wear a life jacket with their parent, but I was on the bank with no life jacket, with water rushing by, and my dad up the river from me and looking back down and hoping I was all right.
Yeah, that's a Coastie. You went to Bi-Mart and you got those hip waders for $3.99. Yep. You were out there getting it done. Probably didn't have a whole lot of clothes on either. You were just getting it done. Salt water in your veins is kind of how I picture it. You grow up around all that salty air, and it just makes you a little tougher than us over here on the valley. That's just my opinion. And I don't have any real data on that. It's like an intangible. I consider that a compliment, but there is that crazy reputation component that maybe is not complimentary. But
yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe we take it as a compliment from time to time, because it means that maybe we're not too soft. But it just reminiscing back on those times, it's funny all the little things that flood into your mind. I can remember because as a little guy, you're trying to cast out there, and drift fishing is really hard, because breaking off and re-rigging, as you all know, is one of the biggest challenges to keeping your ADD or whatever at bay, because you can break off and be done. But my dad got me into just finally, you're going to throw lures, you're going to throw spinners. And but I remember getting out in those little hip waders, and I'd be looking just to get that water about an inch from the top of my boot, because I could get that deep and get out there. And inevitably, every trip, I'd get water in my boots, and then my feet would be cold, and I might spend some time up in the truck while my dad's down on the bank and
pushing the limit a little bit.
Always, pushing the limit to get that little extra cast out there. But I can still remember my first steelhead. Of that whole time, I only caught one, but it was on I want to say it was a flash and glow.
Spin and glow?
No, it wasn't a spin and glow, but it was a spinner with a silver blade, and it had the little orange beads up the middle. And I'm drawing a blank on it was like a Bud's. But anyway, I caught a steelhead on that, and was pretty, then quit fishing for steelhead, and sports took over for a while. But we also, grew up with fishing bass. My parents got a cabin out at 10 Mile Lakes, and when I was in 6th grade, spent a lot of time early mornings with an outboard, getting up with a little Evinrude 14-foot, and fishing nose hook night crawlers. My dad and I would get out, and he even had a syringe to put a little air bubble inside.
Oh, yeah.
Anything to slow down the drop of that worm. Didn't fish artificial stuff hardly ever. We would even get crawdads and keep them. I'll never forget. Sorry, I can get sidetracked.
No, you're good. That's the point.
I'll never forget my dad. We caught crawdads up the river, and he put them in a crawdad trap, and we dumped them off on 101 in a little pond and waited a week to come back because we were going to fish those at 10 Mile. So we had to come back, get those crawdads, and they were still there. He threw it out there where no one would find it and got those and went out and fished crawdads. But a big thing for us too was catching little bluegill, little bait fish in the weeds, and then we'd go out to Rocky Point. Anybody who's ever been to Lakeside knows Rocky Point, probably the most popular fishing spot on the lake. And you just hook right behind the dorsal fin on that little bluegill and throw that bluegill out there, and eventually that thing would start running around like crazy. And then you'd flip your bail when a bass would take it and let it run, and then snap the bail over and yank. And caught my biggest bass, at a young age, 4 or 5 pounds at doing that. But
that'll hook you on bass fishing pretty quick. You catch one like that.
And that artificial fishing was always a little, just a little more challenging, really. Got into that a little bit more later, as of the last five years or more ish. But grew up doing a lot of crabbing, bat trout fishing out at Diamond Lake since 3rd grade. My dad and I would do an annual and sleep in his pickup in the canopy in the snow with a propane heater until we fell asleep. Turn that off, playing cribbage at 4th grade. Get up in a no-covered 14-foot aluminum boat in the snow, bail it out if it was full of water, get out there and freeze and catch trout with power bait and Velveeta cheese and WD-40 and all the stuff.
All the master tricks.
Yeah. So my main growing up was doing trout and bass, and then getting into some steelhead and then salmon as well. All those main fisheries that kind of the Oregon coast is known for. Yeah,
and Chris and I are both steelhead fishermen. I would say, like, if I'm going to pick a fish to go catch, I would choose a steelhead. If I knew I could go out and catch one. If the steelhead aren't running, then I'm going to go after whatever else I can fish for. But I know Chris does a lot of coastal steelhead. Now, Adam, you grew up on the East Coast, but then came back to the West Coast. So talk about kind of your experiences over there, and then how you guys connected as friends and how that's kind of evolved over the years as far as outdoor related stuff.
Well, that's a fair question. I want to know what you catch with crawdad, but that could be a different conversation.
That's largemouth.
Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
They'll eat anything.
So I grew up, and my dad grew up in Coos Bay. Married my mom. Long story. Anyway, I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and out there, we had boats, and we would go out and catch. They're mahi-mahi. They call them dolphin, and that was terrifying the first time, where it's like, oh gosh, I'm catching flipper. Like, this is not going to go over well, but it wasn't.
They made a movie. You might have been in that. Yeah.
Maybe. I got no copyrights or anything, but and so then out there, there's fish everywhere, and they're great fish. There's no salmon. I'm sorry. There's dolphin. There's sailfish, there's marlin, there's wahoo. And so normally what you do is you'd go out in the morning with a cast net, and you can catch your fish out anywhere. I took James one time, or my neighbors did, and that's what they do. No bait. You just go out, catch them, and that or ballyhoo. Yeah.
So you guys knew each other while you were there, though? Or was that later on?
No, this was after later on we went down there. But so, you go out, catch your fish or your bait fish, and then you just troll. And there's everything out there. There's sharks, there's everything. And so it was a good time. We'd go out, me and my dad would go out since I was 5. And it was either go to church or go fishing. And back then, church wasn't as fun, so fishing it was. And me and my dad would go out every Saturday, every Sunday for, I don't know, probably 10 years. Until then we moved over here and had the opportunity. That's where I came over, met James, and a great group of people. And I mean, I don't know, never gone back to live. It is definitely a fishing haven over there. If you can do it, I would recommend it every day of the week. Probably shoot for like the December, March time because it gets a little warm, but it's a beautiful place.
And that Florida fishing was mostly offshore. Did you ever get seasick, or did you have problems with that, or no?
Actually, surprisingly, there I did not. And then I moved here, and I do get pretty seasick now.
You go out the West Coast.
Yeah.
He likes to stay in the bay. He does a lot of crabbing.
Yep. Love the crabbing. Sometimes the patch helps, but not always. But yeah, I mean, it's a different place, but I've enjoyed the salmon fishing. And honestly, I mean, if I'm going to pick one, I would pick a salmon every time. But even between both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty spoiled on the West Coast, and I don't think we know it as much, but we see, there's sunshine and all that stuff that goes along with Florida that is appealing from a West Coast perspective. You look over there, and I've always wanted to catch a tarpon, so that's kind of a bucket list fish for me, and I've never targeted them, but I would love to catch one.
There is a place in Florida where there's like just tarpon everywhere, and if you throw a shrimp in, it's like throwing like bait into like a bass pool. They just go crazy. But it's a fun place, and it is beautiful. I mean, it is kind of flatter oceans usually, and palm trees and sand. Did a lot of like flat ocean fishing, I mean, everything. There's everything over there.
Like, is it like mangrove type fishing for like bonefish?
There is some. I mean, you can find snook everywhere if you wanted to. Like Bimini is probably a 90-mile drive across the ocean, and that place it's like going to Africa if you just want to go find stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was a blessing, but again, I'd rather be here. I mean, it's a blessing.
And now you guys are here, and you do a bass fishing tournament every year. The group of high school buddies, is that what it is, or is it just how has it grown? I think you're on your fifth year.
Yeah,
fifth year.
Yeah. We have a close friend that we have known, and I have known since elementary school. But his family is blessed to have some property out in the sand dunes that they can never sell.
Yeah, you have to be grandfathered in.
If they were ever to not want to own the property, the state would take it back. It has two or three. There's a couple of lakes, but there's 3 homes on 2 cabins and 1 home on those lakes, and they're all gated to get into. But where everybody goes and runs around in the dunes on side by sides and 4-wheelers and whatnot, there's a fenced off lakes out there that they over time originally were for duck hunting, and they have blinds to this day on there. And they would raise ducks and ankle band ducks that were just particular for those lakes, just to bring in other ducks to fly around with. And at one time they would, put rice down on one end and blow a whistle to get the ducks to fly back and forth. And it was quite a haven for that. But it's not so much of a duck hunting lodge as it used to be. But now there's been largemouth bass have, grown tremendously out there over the time. And how it all started, actually, me and my friend Roger, the Tomlin family, that's his family, but the Conrad Lumber and Conrad Forest Products is the longtime 100-year-old family that's owned it out there. But we went out there with a couple of friends from college and Roger, and we were throwing lures off of the dock and catching bedded female, hen bass, and it was spitting eggs. And I just thought, we should come out here and fish bass. Cause I grew up at 10 Mile Lakes thinking, and then seeing that, I was like, this is something we need to do. And why not? And all it ever takes is somebody to organize it, but you got to organize it. And so, that's what we did. I put together the deal, and now we're on our 5th year, and we make some swag, and we call it Kiss My Bass. And it's become a ton of fun. We have 20 guys right now that go, and we do a Facebook live draw where my daughter, who's 11-year-old, Beatrice, has done that every year. And, You get a teammate, and
It's a random draw.
yeah, random draw, and that's coming up here second weekend in June, and we'll do winners of that. You take best 5 fish. You got to take a photograph and of the scale. You got to see the whole fish so no one's cheating. And then with your partner afterwards, we do a horseshoe tournament, and the winners of the bass tournament each get $700 each, and the bass or the horseshoes $400 each. And we eat good and have a blast. And the tournament's from 7 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. And so that's been something that's newer, but something to keep the group going out and enjoying the property and being able to fish. And so that's gotten us the whole group inspired. We have a 20-guy text string, and we keep in contact year round. And then the bass tournament comes alive, and
It starts popping off about March, though, where everyone starts talking.
yeah, and we got our
A lot
teams
of jibs
drawn
right
now,
now. Yeah.
so everybody's able to talk trash, and but that's made us all learn more about bass fishing and learn about from drop shot to all the newer stuff and different tubes and
Isn't that, we've talked about that on here, that nobody pictures Oregon and bass fishing. Those aren't two things that typically come together, but as the salmon and steelhead populations have declined a little bit, or the fishing hasn't been as good, all of us that just love to fish have kind of turned into, okay, well, let's figure something else we can catch. And that whole pound per pound, bass are a fun fish to catch.
Oh, yeah.
And they're aggressive, and so you don't have to be a great fisherman to attract a bass. To be really good at it, yes. And the more time that fish has been caught, the harder that fish is to catch. But
one interesting part is that it's never the same lure that wins the next year. Like, we had one guy show up, and he had a spinner, and he couldn't lose. Like, he almost every cast he really was good.
he just had the hot lure for the
He
tournament.
had the hot lure.
Black
But then
spinnerbait.
next year, everyone's like, okay, black spinner
Loading up.
on the
Yeah.
yep. And then it was dead.
Yeah. And that's fun when you're the guy that has the lure.
Yeah.
I went on a smallmouth trip like that just up at Green Peter, and we were just fishing for fun, and my lure was just on fire that day. I was out fishing guys like 15-1, and then I was acting like it was all me, but I knew it was the lure. And so then my buddy that was in here earlier, he's like, can I borrow your rod for a little bit? And then he caught like 4 in a row, and I'm struggling with other stuff trying to get him to work, so there is definitely something to that.
yeah. And I will say that tournament it's like he said, there you never know who's going to win, how much. Last year, my teammate and I won. We caught 2 fish, and a lot of guys didn't even catch a fish. But the year he's
tough
talking
conditions.
about with that like black spinnerbait,
It was hot.
our buddy caught 3 5-pounders, and they caught about 17 pounds in fish between their 5. And my teammate and I was with Adam's younger brother, and I don't know, we caught probably 20 fish between us, but we just didn't get the weight, and that was our best year we've ever had. But so we always say, no matter how good you are, you never know, one fish can win it, because there is 8-9 pounders out there. There's a few from 6 to 9 out there, and it could catch one, and it can change the whole thing. So that's what makes bass and that tournament a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I've fished with James a little bit, and with Adam, we've only crabbed with each other, which was always a good time. But James is another one of these guys that's just, if there's a fish in the water, I always have faith that he's going to probably have a chance at catching it. He's got like that. I don't know what it is, but there's just some guys out there that are just good at catching fish. And I put myself, and I've talked about this with other people on the show, I'm kind of in that middle, and I would say you're towards the higher end of somebody that knows how to go catch a fish. I don't know if it's reading water or just doing it since you were so little or what it is.
I'll agree with you, but don't give him.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm like, oh, gee, thanks. No, because I don't know that thanks. That sounds.
But our
really
other
nice.
friends,
But
like Bill Higbee talks about that. Man, if James is with you, he's going to catch something,
the things, and this comes from growing up with my father and analyzing. When you're analyzing what you're doing and where you're messing up, it comes down to I think my dad always says it's like the top 10% catch 90% of the fish, and it's the little things that make the differences. So a lot of times you might be talking to somebody and they're like, that doesn't matter. But if you have 5 of those things that they say doesn't matter, and you're doing those 5, maybe now all of a sudden that does matter. That it is making a difference. And for me, one of the biggest things, if we're looking at like steelhead and bass, for me, and all fit and salmon, quality time in the water. If your bait is working, if your herring spinning right and in the water. More like I'll be amazed sometimes at the like bass and steelhead where it comes to casting. Salmon, you're just setting it, and trolling. But I'm always curious how many more times I cast than maybe the average guy that's out for the same amount of time, or how much more time they're spending rigging up. And so that my dad has always said, it's quality time in the water. So if that was one reason why a lot of guys got rid of the bait caster level wind reels, because anytime you're dealing with that backlash is time, not you're avoiding quality time in the water. So if you're going to move to a spinning reel, you're going to have more quality time in the water.
And the guys that are on that side that like the bait caster are going to say, well, I can get a longer drift, but you're not a big fan of bait casters, right, Chris?
Yeah, well, because I didn't grow up with them,
Me too.
Yeah, and it's a skill set you need to learn because it's very beneficial to use one when you're drift fishing. You're controlling that action as you're in the water. And to be honest, the devil's in the details when you're fishing, especially bass fishing and steelhead fishing. And if you're not in the water, you're never going to catch fish. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people, especially like up on the Columbia, you've been up on a boat long enough, you can tell when there's just garbage on your lead, on the spinner. You should be able to look at a rod and know it's running right, especially with spinners, but herring you can too.
Completely.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, especially up there, if you've been on a boat for 4 or 5 days, I'll fish for 7 days a stretch. And day 5, you start getting tired, and then you start not catching as many fish because you're not paying attention. And it's very important. I mean, I kept track. It was maybe 2018 or 19. It took me 62 hours to catch one hatchery steelhead on the Nestucca. And I was fishing 3 days a week. A lot from the bank because I wasn't running a drift boat that year. But I spent a lot of time in the water, and just the numbers weren't there or the presentation wasn't right. But yeah, it matters like a lot. If you want to be successful, it really matters.
And I'd like to say, too, when I mentioned steelhead fishing down the Oregon coast where we grew up, Coos Bay, that we mainly fish the Coos, which has multiple forks, and the Coquille for the most part. There's some other rivers all around there, too, but it is mainly all bank fishing I grew up doing. So a lot of guys like y'all here in the valley think of most people think of it being from a drift boat that didn't grow up in those coastal streams with those the nearby, and we're blessed down there with tens of 20s of miles of bank access that you can go and now they've charged Weyerhaeuser, whomever is charging a little bit of money, but it's not the hundreds of dollars to get those permits now. But there was a spell where a friend of mine, Justin Traver, we grew up together, and we were both unemployed and in our early 20s, and we both went back and stayed pretty much with my parents, and his parents were down in Coos Bay. And we fished 5 out of 7 days per week, bank fishing all day. And we would go fish from 1 mile to 5 mile, or we'd start at 5 mile typically and work our way down up the river and catch fish, hit all of our holes. Then we'd go back up to 5 mile and work our way back down. And I mean, that year we both caught, I was in the 80s or 90s, and that was over a 4 or 5 week period, of landed steelhead. And he was somewhere, not that high, but he was probably around 50. He might have been around 50. But we had a blast, and great stories about getting up in there, and the logging would shut the road down sometimes, and we'd come in from Coquille and came over the mountain one day. Great story. We come over the mountain one day with my dad and his buddy Elmer to come in because logging had that cut off, and we were like, oh man, no one's going to be up there. So we're going to have the entire river above 2 mile to ourselves. If we go clear down to Coquille, come over the mountains, come down the backside. We get up early, the 4 of us, we all do that.
It was you, Traver, Jim, and Elmer?
Elmer, yep.
That's a good crew.
And we come down the backside and the gate's locked. Oh. And we're at like 9 mile. maybe 9 or 10 mile. And we wanted to get down to 5 mile. So we're miles away. And we're like, well, we're here. Let's start. We get out of the truck, park at the gate, and we start walking and looking for places to fish. Me and Traver are busting hump. We're way ahead of these guys. You know, they're, 30 years older than us. And we're going, and you'd see these old crummies coming up. The old loggers are coming up and passing us every once in a while. And this little Datsun truck, comes by with big old, chainsaws, big old bars on them. And this guy comes cruising by, and we see him, and about 5 minutes later, it's coming back down river, and on the tailgate's my dad and Elmer sitting on his tailgate, driving right back by us, just waving and smiling, and we're sitting there busting our humps. We're a mile down river ahead of them, and they just are laughing as they go by, and they told him, don't pick them up, and so they got down there, but we ended up being a wonderful day. We got all the way down there, caught the biggest steelhead of my life, a native that day, 20, right, big, huge buck, around 20 pounds, and that same day, we ended up having to hike all the way back up to that spot, and I'll never forget Justin. He had this hen on, and he stepped forward off the bank and completely disappeared. Bloop, gone. Totally under
a deep
all
hole.
that came up was the rod, and he ended up landing that fish, but disappeared completely underwater with my dad and Elmer watching from the road up above us.
Was he in waders?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
Full
scary.
waders. Bloop. Just gone. While he's fighting that fish. It was hilarious. But he still landed it. Nice, 12-pound hen. It was great. Ended up being a great day. But anyway.
Oh, that's a good story. Those are the times that you think when you're experiencing them, you're like, we're going to do this every year. I can't wait for it. And then
It's always going to happen.
How many years ago was that?
Yeah,
And probably never
15, 20, 16. Yeah, and it has deteriorated. All of the whole fishery on all those rivers down there has lessened and lessened. I don't have the stories like we did back then.
Well, steelhead fishing in general, I think, has gotten a lot more difficult than it used to be. It's just the counts just haven't been, at least in Oregon, what they used to be, at least on the rivers that I fish. I haven't. I mean, we had, 2 or 3 years ago, we had that really good winter run that I fished with you a couple times. And that was my first time getting back into it. And my wife just happened to be out of town, and James was going fishing. So we fished hard one day, and we had such a good time. I'm like, I'm just going to stay at your house, and we'll go do this again the next day, And that was when I first started realizing that I had gout. And so I remember you had a fish on, and I'm trying to get there with this net, and I'm kind of gimping over, and you're like, can someone else net this fish? This guy's got gout. You're yelling that across the whole system. But it was good. I mean, we got into some fish, and I remember watching just even the night before, tying up your gear and that anticipation and just figuring out the right setup and having all those rigs ready to go. And I remember you saying that back then. So, I mean, it's cool that your dad gave you that advice, and it's stuck with you all these years, and you've shared it with other people. And it really is true. It's all about that time in the water, because I fish with those guys that are on the bank the whole time. They get hung up that first time, and they didn't have anything ready to go. So, 25 minutes later before they're back in the water, and by then you might have 2 fish on the bank, you know?
You never know, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it like fishing on the Nestucca under the 101. I went by myself one day, and there's this old guy, and his wife showed up, and she brought a lawn chair, and he was 4 casts, 2 fish. It's like, wow, man, that's fast. And I just watched him, and it was the exact, the perfect seam. Catches his wife's two fish in another 10 minutes, and then they leave. And I'm like, he knew exactly.
Well done.
And some of it, it just matters what your knowledge of the river bottom and where they're laying. Yeah.
I ran into him again, and those are the guys you want to chat up a little bit. And he's like, I've been fishing this river for 60 years. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you're the guy.
Yeah. You're the one I want to talk
guy,
to.
for sure.
When people talk about how do you improve at fishing, it's watching those people.
Yeah.
That's what I think, being a good at observation and really taking note, and finite details, where exactly did he land? How much weight did he have? How long was his leader? What did his presentation look like? All those little things. It's not that's all those things that will separate you if you can take note when you see somebody who's better than you, and don't think you know more than the next guy, because you see that all the time too, where people will try all sorts of different setups they heard about or they think might work, but don't reinvent the wheel. Find somebody around you that knows more than you or is better than you, and watch them. If I'm on the river, like you said, and you see an old guy like that, or anybody who's catching multiple fish, then where exactly did his line land?
Yeah.
How did he react with the tip of his rod? You know,
I remember
because you can
too.
drop it into a slot where people are letting it float right over the fish without lowering that tip 3 feet. There's just so many little things that being observant.
Yeah, I remember everyone that morning was casting on the far side of the river, and they're running big. They're the foam bobbers, like those cheap big 3-ounce ones, and he's running a little tiny like pencil bobber. And he's just right in some slack water, like 12 feet out in front of him. And a couple days later, I ran down there and caught 2 fish real quick. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is the spot. But now the river's changed so much, it's just not the same there anymore. Yeah. But he was great to talk to. And it's like we've talked several times, especially steelhead fishing. Why reinvent the wheel? I mean, how many guys were catching stuff on like spinning glows and corkies? And I still fish a yarny. I mean,
oh, big time. I caught more fish than anything on a yarny.
Yeah, and a lot of guys, like diehard steelhead guys, will still run them. But when you get new into that, like I a lot like you, played a lot of sports, so I stopped fishing and hunting quite a bit, and then I got back into it in my early 20s. And like I didn't even remember what it was like catching steelhead and Chinook and stuff. And luckily for me, my cousin's a guide, so I kind of any day I want, I can jump on a boat. It's a benefit that I have. I'm pretty blessed. But I always asked him, "What are you running? Where at?" And when we're fishing, that there's not clients, they're all guides on the boat because they're all buddies. So that it's like a wealth of knowledge, and you have to pay attention because the numbers are way down. More people are fishing, and it's super competitive, and it's like
that's true. Yeah.
And I mean I have a hard time getting up for work in the morning, but I'll get up at midnight and go fishing. I've done it so many times.
You have to get a spot.
Go pick a buddy up, and
right.
And it's funny because I used to catch
bank fishing.
Yes, especially bank fishing. I used to catch a lot of hell from one of my friends. Why are we here this early? And like 10 minutes later, like 15 more trucks show up. I'm like, well, that's why we better get down there.
Mm-hmm. That's there's not as many. I mean, I was thinking about while you guys are talking, our friends that live up Green Gate, where they would just go and like jump in the river and just throw fish up onto the, not anymore, but it was an interesting time. Not as many people, but.
I was talking to my grandfather the other day. He's going to be 89 this year. He came here in 62 from California. And he said in the late 60s, he used to go up on the Trask and shoot salmon with a bow, him and his buddies. Yeah, he said, oh, man, you could walk across the fish. Mm-hmm. There were that many of them. And they were all, I catch a big Chinook. It's kind of big, I guess, And then you look at Polaroids, and it's like, oh, every fish was bigger than that in like 85.
Yeah.
It does seem like, though, we'll have these good runs every once. It's not like we're making it sound like it's really bleak, but I think the Springer, they were worried about him this year, but then it seems like I'm seeing a lot of guys catching all of a sudden. I know they're starting to maybe finally do something about the sea lions. I'd heard through the grapevine they were going to take some of the sea lions out, and because I think that's the biggest thing as far as a predator. Like they're keying in on these fish, and they're chasing them into the rivers, and then they're just hammering them.
Honestly, it's a lot of fishermen don't want to accept the fact that it's all things.
Yeah,
it's commercial fishing. I'm not a huge climate change guy in the political sense.
But that's been huge.
But it's been
a
huge.
lot of spawning fish.
Kills all those fish that run out there do not make it to come back. And then you have the predators that, our state for a long time has been unwilling to accept the fact that you got to deal with them because we're dumping millions of dollars into hatcheries and all these other programs, and I hate to say, but a lot of the native organizations have been doing kind of more than we have. You go up into Washington and the fishing's great. You go up into Alaska or Canada, it's a lot better than in Oregon. And there's other ways you can get around that. And even if it's still bleak, I'm still going. I'm not going to not fish.
Yeah, and I think that there's there's good organizations that are trying to make a difference and trying to get some habitat change and just various, but like you say, there's a million different issues that lead to it, and
not fixing one's going to fix the whole thing. You got to kind of just tackle it all at the same time. It's hard to do.
I haven't even bought a license yet this year for fishing. I just haven't got around to it. But yeah,
I'm January 1st.
Usually I'm the same way. Guy. January something. Yeah.
I haven't caught a lot of fish this year, but I've caught a few.
Have you?
Yeah. The You're like you're saying though, it's hard. You'd have to get down to that biologist level and that environmental scientist to get like you said, yes, the sea lion, but I don't think they can decimate the amount that we're seeing. It's like you said, so many different ecological.
I think it's the ocean
factors.
Stuff.
There's a lot of food out there and temperatures and I just don't know how many fish we're really getting. The hatcheries are really putting in, and how many native fish are spawning. It was funny this year. It was one of the first times I was talking to my dad and one of his friends, and we were saying, why don't we fished up these rivers for 20, 30 years or more or whatever them, and why don't we see these fish bedding and spawning together?
Yeah,
where are they doing that? Where are they doing that? And so we're right where the smolt for the hatchery are put into the creek, but I've spent enough time there where I'm not seeing thousands of fish spawning right there. So where is that taking place? And are they almost is it happening, or what are we truly relying on? Native hatchery, there's just stuff that I don't have the know-how on, or the studies or knowledge on, and it would be curious to know where are all these tens of thousands and thousands of fish.
I fish the LC. I fish the LC a bunch when I can get down that way, and they have a hatchery there, and you can fish like right up next to the hatchery. Caught some big fish there, but they release a lot of fish, and it's like 1,500 come back. Yeah. And what's happening to the 1,500? We're obviously not catching them all. That's a numbers thing, right? You do the math, but I have a friend of mine who lives on the LC. His family's been there for like 100 years, and he was telling me he's 74 this year, and he said, "Man, when I was a kid, this thing was full of fish. What happened?" And I'm like, it's like a question that no one can answer. It seems to me, or everyone has a different answer, but it's like you said, where are the fish spawning at?
You should see them bedding up.
Somewhere.
We've all seen a salmon or steelhead make a bed.
Yeah.
Right? But why aren't we seeing those by the thousands? Or they got to do it somewhere. And that's just even my dad and his buddy, I said it to him on a text thread, and they're both like, yeah. Now you say that.
It's a good question.
That is odd. Why have we never seen them, like this is the area, or where they close it to the public and say, well, this is protected spawning area? You would think they do that at every river, because they make the ground with gravel or whatever.
Getting it ready for them.
Getting it ready for them. But it's like they're just letting it randomly happen, and I don't know that it's happening.
Well, and I know there's been some dams removed, and there's been different... they're always changing the environmental conditions to try to make it better for the salmon and the steelhead, or, there's all kinds of political influence and all these things. But like you said, even at the predatory level, it's got to be bigger ocean condition type stuff. Because
I would think so, because they spend the majority of their life right out in the ocean. If you're talking, let's say, what are they, 5 years for a salmon, roughly?
I think there's different...
whatever.
3-year
Let's say
fish,
it
5-year
is.
fish.
Yeah, let's say it's 5 years. Well, they're probably spending 3 out in the ocean, or more. I don't know. We would have to ask someone. But like sea lions are killing them, but not in the. I mean, sea lions hammer sturgeon way more than anything else. Especially released sturgeon. I mean, below. I mean, they can. I've seen guys get in fights with each other for catching those undersized sturgeon and letting them go, and sea lions or seals, picking them up.
Well, and it's not like it's just an Oregon thing though, too. Because Alaska, their king fishery has gotten really in bad shape from what it used to be. And they're trying to figure that out. So.
Us talking about this, I think it's funny because we spend so much time thinking about how to catch fish and less time thinking about why they're not there.
Yeah.
And what one thing about fishermen is that we have to be perpetual optimists. And I always think that's funny when I hang out I do beat up on my dad because he's pessimistic, but I'll argue and I'll say, tell me you're a realist, Dad. But he says he's a realist, but you got to wake up in the morning I'm going to catch fish. This is going to be an epic day. Yeah. And that's what keeps me, that's what I see separates a lot of guys that want to fish, but we always are just thinking about how we're going to catch fish, how it's going to be an epic day. And but then to sit and talk about the finite details of why the runs are down, it doesn't change where we got to still catch fish.
Yeah, and it wasn't a topic I thought we were going to talk about.
No,
today,
but we're all fishermen.
It's pertinent. I mean,
My wife always asks me, why do you keep going? I'm like, well, I don't know anything else. Yeah. I mean, when I was fishing with your dad as a kid in Waders, I used to fish up on the hog line, June hog run, that doesn't exist, as a kid with my grandfather, walking boat to boat when you could just walk across the river. And that, that's why I explain to people who don't do it. It's like, well, it's the only thing I know. Yeah. So I've tried to supplement a little bit of my fishing by going to Alaska or going to Baja, which is great, but it's like winter, steelhead fishing or salmon fishing. It's what we grew up with. But I think, like fishermen don't talk about it enough. And I posed the question to my friend the other day, who I've done most of my fishing with in life, that if they asked us to not fish for 5 or 6 years, but to still pay and fish would come back, would you do it? And I said, I would, because I could find something else to do.
Yeah.
But I always wonder how many guys would say, yeah, I'd do that.
I'd do that.
I'd do that too.
For the salmon to come back in big numbers. I know that's not a real...
Yeah, rub a lamp, ask the genie. But come on.
No, for sure.
That money isn't going to make the fish show up.
No,
obviously. It's not making it show up right now.
No, it's not, but we're still fishing hard.
Yeah, I'll quit fishing, but I'm not going to pay them and cross my fingers that that's going to make the fish show up.
Well,
I'll quit fishing for it.
But it gives them funding.
Yeah,
but funding's not working.
It does for sure.
It sounds like.
Yeah, we give the government a lot of money.
Oh, a bunch.
They could find some other places. Probably,
you know what?
Could reallocate.
People would work those step programs right now. They're volunteers anyway. So all they got to do is get the milk and the eggs and make babies.
Last year, I think they took $63 million in that last package from the federal government for salmon, and I see that number. I'm like, I hope salmon come back. But are they going to? That's the question.
Yeah.
Well, now that we're all thoroughly depressed on
I ain't depressed. No, because I know I'm still going to go fishing.
Yeah. And to me, it's even when I was in San Francisco fishing by the San Francisco Bay Bridge, and there's 70 guys out there to catch one 20-pound halibut a day. They're still out there fishing because it's that what you're getting at, that perpetual optimist that is in a fisherman that like, okay, today's going to be the time. Or as soon as that rod starts to bounce, even if it's a little sculpin, it could have been that halibut. Yeah.
Yep.
It's something that we all enjoy, right? It's just like the night before, like I can't sleep.
Yeah.
So
tomorrow's going to be good.
Tomorrow is going to be a good, and even if it's not, I still have a great, because I'm with my buddies. Even if I'm by myself, it's like, I'd rather be standing in a freezing river in the middle of December than being at work. That's for sure.
That's true.
That is true.
Bad day fishing beats a good day working all day long.
That is no doubt.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about things you guys have done together, Adam and James. Like, I know you guys have done a fair amount of crabbing with each other, right? And you had a recent incident on a crab pot. I don't know if Adam was with you, James, but where that cormorant got involved.
I wasn't there for that one.
No, but yeah, I would say that's one of the best fisheries where we grew up. I mean, you have I believe it's, last I heard, it was still the second deepest bay on the west coast of the United States, Coos Bay, Oregon. And we have an amazing crab fishery there. And growing up, that's something I've done since a child.
Oh, yeah.
And Adam's dad was always great. Adam's dad was always the guy that would put him in overnight and get him.
We'd all go pick him up the next day.
We'd be sleeping in. Excuse me. We'd sleep in a lot of mornings and get up, and his dad would already have crab caught, brought in, cooked, and the pot
could
set
eat them
again.
right on the shoreline, and yeah.
So
I don't know if
take a bunch of traps out there and drop them in, and just let them soak through the night, and then go pick them all up.
I was going to say, I don't know that that's super advisable. A lot of people feel a certain way about it. I believe it is legal.
Yeah.
But you can lose. The tides can rip your pots different directions. You can lose them. People can check them for you. But it is a great way, and that's something that we know some people that do that. And actually, the last time I went out, I checked 4 or 5 of a family friend's pots that they put up the bay, and I had 12 keepers in the first 4 pulls. And then I only needed 24 more to limit, and we banged those out in a couple hours and came in with 36 crab here just a couple weeks ago. So
and that's not in Coos Bay.
Epic.
Don't go there.
Yeah, don't go there. But no, that's down there, and so crabbing is awesome. But yes, we other than dealing with the sea lions, seals are a lot nicer to your traps and whatnot. The more you use traps, which is gonna keep the sea lions away more so than like a ring that lays flat and the bait's exposed. But we've pulled in traps that have been torn to pieces by sea lions. For years, people have sworn that the sea lions don't eat chicken. I've watched a sea lion come up out of the water and chomp down a piece of chicken looking at me. So they find protein. Eventually, they're figuring out that's protein, and it's going to make them, feed them at some level. It might not taste as good as everything else, but
they're trying to get to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah,
keep
right.
eating.
Just when I went out the other
counts.
day, we got that limit, but there was you see the sea lion working the pots, and they'll go and they'll see your buoy, and then they follow the rope down and they flip it over, mangle it, and then they go on to the next one, and you're sitting there throwing stuff or trying to get them to knock it off and take off, or driving toward them and yelling at them. That's all you can really do. But like you were saying, Sam, it was funny because this, of all the times, this was the first time that we found an abandoned. You can just tell when things have been lost or abandoned, that the ropes are dirty. They've been sitting for a long time. The tide has pulled them in and out from the depths, and we could just tell that there was no one within any vicinity looking, or any other line of buoys connected to this one. So we went over and we pulled it, and it was a ring, and in it was a dead cormorant, and it had been eaten by crabs. And what had happened, right, is it had gone down or chased this ring down, and going for the fish bait that was in it, went after it, got itself hung up into this cloth netting that's on those rings, and found its demise. And then crab showed up and ate it. And we pulled that thing in, and we had one large keeper that was eating cormorant. And I had to.
You found my cormorant ring?
Yeah, I got your cormorant ring. Oh, you baited it with
Of course
cormorant?
I do. That's how.
That's a
I always
secret
like to throw out
family
one
recipe.
cormorant.
Yeah.
Oh,
ring.
Did you find it alive, or how'd you get it in there?
I don't share secrets.
It was just funny because we had a cormorant baited, big dungy in there, and I had actually taken my girlfriend for her first time with my family crabbing, and pulling this big black bird in the bottom of this thing, and I had to sit there and break its neck and bones and pull it out of this whole mesh, this netting, because it was so tangled in there. You could see this thing struggled. They could probably hold I'm sure they can hold their breath for a minute or two, or maybe more.
Yeah, they're a big bird. Aren't
Yeah,
they?
it got down there and it was all jumbled up. But trying to get it out of that stupid thing to not bring that whole carcass back in, and then the one keeper was all tangled in it too, and it ate good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you see those nature shows where those guys put the chain around the cormorant, and they dive down and catch the fish for them, but then they can't swallow it and they spit it in their boat. So, I mean, they train them to go down and get fish for
Wow,
them.
no, I've not seen that.
Well,
Look at that.
it's on Discovery Channel or something. I've seen it.
Not a family secret.
No. But I mean, they usually keep them alive. So that's where you're going a little different
True.
direction.
I like
Yeah.
to do my own thing.
Yeah. No, I would say Chris and I are both unique to that. We grew up in the valley, and we were talking about how you Coasties are a little, you got a little salt water in your veins. You can get things done. But I would consider myself a hybrid, and I don't know if you relate to this, Chris, but because my family had a timeshare over at the coast, so we were at the coast 2-3 times a year. So we were always at the coast, crabbing, clamming. My dad used to fish off the jetties, fish for surf perch and that type of thing, and so I always felt like I was more of a local than just the normal weekendy tourist, and that was my one connection to being like, okay, I'm kind of a coastie too.
Yeah, my dad always did everything. There was always, you go through the year, there's always something to do in the outdoors. So my dad would be like, we're going to go clamming. It would be after school, but sometimes I'd go to school late because we were clamming, we're crabbing, we're fishing, and we're always doing stuff over there. We're so close to it,
And the quality of that seafood when you get it fresh,
so good.
It's just so much different than
It's
anything
amazing.
you've ever.
I was gonna say, you
had.
ever peel mussels off the rocks? Those are pretty money too.
Yeah, it's a
Unless there's a
special
red
thing.
tide, that's not good.
Yeah, I don't know. Growing up on the coast, and this is maybe an obnoxious thing about us, but I won't buy seafood at a restaurant. Typically, rarely ever. Maybe a clam, maybe a raw oyster or something. I had some
say.
oysters this weekend up in Portland, but it was, they weren't even locally. There's some Seattle or, Yakamoto's or whatever they
Yeah,
are.
I like those.
But it's like you learn the difference. It's funny, it's sad to some people that, that you think about that they've never had anything that wasn't frozen prior. And you get things frozen coming right in and out of the boats, but to eat something fresh to table, it's so hard to beat that it's hard. I'll pick something else if I'm going to go out to eat. But a lot of people that's all they're used to. And that's fine.
one thing we'll do too, is always get a bunch of oysters.
Yeah.
And do them a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, a lot of that bass tournament too.
Oh, and you guys, you're the first guy that ever showed me the steaming oysters thing. My dad always fried oysters, or I'd had them on barbecue, like bacon wrapped and things, and they were good. But the fried ones always make me sick for some reason. But man, once I had your steamed oysters, I never want to eat them any other way. They're so good that way.
Yeah, on the half
just a
shell.
screwdriver, and some butter, and
we always had them
tiger sauce.
raw. Like my dad has a oyster knife like with his initials on it.
Oh yeah.
Because I grew up my dad was a fireman for 30 years. My grandfather was too, but they would have a big oyster feed every year. So it'd be like Hubbard, Aurora, Woodburn would get together and they would go down to Yaquina Bay at the farm and fill the back of his truck up with bushels of oysters. Nice. And they just drink hams, like the worst beer. I don't care what anyone says, but hams is disgusting. And eat oysters all night. So in my backyard growing up, there's just oyster shells. So I've been eating them my whole life. My dad loves like the beef steaks, and I can't stand them. They're just too much. But like raw on the half shell, I don't know if there's anything better as seafood goes than that for me.
Yeah, Washington just opened a season for where you can actually go harvest your own oysters. Which
you just got to leave the shells, right? I think leave the shells out there.
So like a native raw.
I don't think we'll ever
oyster,
see that here.
Yeah.
Oh well, we've harvested our own oysters before, but I don't know how.
We leave the
listening.
shells somewhere.
Yeah, all you got to do is go near a farm, and they break loose, and they're all over the place. Yeah,
and they're just big old
all over the shore.
Yeah,
I'll tell you. It probably doesn't matter. We went under the McCullough Bridge, right? Coos Bay North Bend Bridge. And
that was a long time ago. You were young.
This is back when it was legal. But we would be headed out to Lakeside, going out to my cabin. My cabin was boat access only, and we'd have a bunch of guys post 18 years old and going to spend days on end having fun out there. And we'd go and stop on the other side of the McCullough Bridge, headed out toward Lakeside, and we'd run down on the beach into the mud flats when the tide was low. And there's oysters are everywhere because they break loose from all the farms and are washed all over. And we
put them in garbage bags, whatever it took, and get out.
You could grab as many as you want.
Well, they were going to go to waste.
Yeah, they weren't going to
waste whatnot.
Well, and some of them may not be from here because they're growing all kinds of stuff in those farms.
You were taking care of the invasive species.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
really.
we're doing them a favor.
Pioneers, really.
Yeah. We got a couple 12-inch oysters off of that, Yeah. Those things were some doozies. But we were talking about, just because I was eating oysters the other day with my girlfriend up north, and I was saying, I wonder how many oysters in one sitting I've put down, maybe in a 24-hour period I've put down. And that's a tough one to call because some people might say I've had 3 or 5 or 10 or 12. But I was thinking I'm up towards of 36.
Oh, I could see
couple dozen.
At least put down 2
I've
dozen.
done probably triple dozen before. Yeah. We've been to the Bass. They got the Bay Area Sportsman's Association down there, and it's all you can eat at their auction. It's all you can eat oysters, and they just keep that table flowing, smoked.
Well, even at that rotary crab feed, you guys were always cooking up oysters there, and there was always a fair amount of sampling, quality control.
Well, making sure they're good.
Yeah. You got to make sure that the guests are happy.
My company would do that.
Yeah, more than 2 or 3.
The key quality control is probably those nights when that's hard to know. You don't know how many is the most oysters you put down a night. That's a good question.
My company would do that for like our yearly meeting because I work for a co-op. And they would spend, I don't know, like 50 or 60,000 on seafood.
Whoa.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, if you're in a certain position in the company, they would ask you to like come work at the door or whatever. But a couple of us went down kind of late in the day and just kept on eating. I ate so many, I don't know how many, but could have been a couple dozen. It was a lot. And it's like my coworkers are making them for us, and they're like, "Are you guys done?" I'm like, "Just keep bringing them because we can eat those things all day." And the next year, it was like no employees allowed to go unless they're working. I ate so many of those things. I mean, God, they're good.
So I had one more story that I was going to mention about James. So this cracks me up. He earns this work trip at work, and he worked for a financial services company. He's still in financial services. So is Adam. You're the outlier in agriculture.
Agriculture, yeah.
But anyway, he goes on this company paid for trip, and I'm picturing kind of a private yacht type setup. And so James is going, okay, I'm going to be offshore. I gotta go catch a fish. So you tell the story. Tell us what you bought and what transpired.
Oh, they probably dumb luck, but it was we were down in the British Virgin Islands, and I was just going, and I just thought, if I'm gonna be down there and gonna be yachting or in a catamaran sailboat between islands, shouldn't I figure out if I should take something? And so I went just to the local sportsman's warehouse and looked for whatever, saltwater, tropical water lures they had. And I probably could go online, but it was more spur of the moment. I didn't really expect much. This is kind of like you're saying, you just give it a shot and see what happens. But it was probably about a 12-inch feathered green and yellow duck colors.
Always good bait.
Yeah. Excuse me. Duck colored. Definitely something to eat. And it had to, so anyway, it was for saltwater fish. And we take it down there, and in between every island, when we had the motor up and running or just the sails, you're clipping along pretty good down there. And we had the boat had. He had his own tackle too, which was funny. These guys, they had some tackle, but it was just like stuff you would never really use, and it was the stuff people had left on the boat or whatnot. And he had a huge reel,
like an old pen,
1,000 yards of line, on it or whatever, and heavy duty. And I would just threw that lure on there, and you could send it back there, and you could see that thing. I'd put it out there. It looked like almost 100 yards. Because I was like, let's just get it way back there and see what happens. And I did no research on how to catch anything like that. And I just put that big lure on there, and you could see it out there, and it would dig into the swells and pop out and shoot up in the air and dig in and pop out. And you're just cruising out there. And I hooked up twice. Yeah. One day I was laying on the front of the boat, and they came and, oh, you got something on, something big, something's yanking your rod all over. And I ran back there, and it was off. How you lost it. And then sure enough, the next day, same thing, went back there and had probably a 20 plus pound big-eyed tuna, reeled that thing in, and was pumped, super pumped. Did have a chef on the boat that was leaned vegetarian. So she loved the beauty of that fish, and she shed a tear when I got that thing in, when I was ready to sashimi that thing up. And for her heartstrings, I went ahead and let it go.
Oh, my God.
You did get a great picture, though. Yeah. I remember when you were on that trip, and I don't know when I got the picture. And I'm like, sure, of course. This guy's out on a work trip, and he catches this big old tuna on the.
Oh, it was a beautiful fish.
It was it's a cool picture. You're in like a tank top holding this thing.
Yeah, no one expected it to happen.
I wish you'd tell a story where you ate it instead of.
I know. Honestly, it was like literally she shed a tear, and she was young. This young little chef and her boyfriend were the captains of that boat, and I just said, okay, I don't want to break her heart anymore, because she wanted to see that fish live. Yeah, and then she cooked me lamb and wagyu.
Yeah, you're a nice guy. Because I would have never done that. Yeah.
But it's a cool story. I mean, to me, that's the heart of an outdoorsman, right?
Yeah,
you're going somewhere where you're supposed to just be on a leisure activity. And I always do this when we go on vacation. I start looking for things I could do. Could I go on a little hunt over here? Or could I, when we go to Hawaii, I'm like, could we do this little goat hunt or this pig hunt? Or could I go on a fishing trip? I always try to fit that in to where it doesn't take too much of my time away from the family, but I could get a little outdoorsman check,
I'm the same way. It's like when my wife and I decide to go on vacation, it's like, well, are we going to go fishing or are we going to go hunting? And luckily, if I go anywhere down south, my wife loves going to Mexico, and she likes that kind of offshore running plugs like what you guys did in Florida. So she'll stay on the boat all day, but it's hard to go to New York, with her because there's no fishing to be done over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're not that into the shopping at the fancy stores.
Oh my God, it's like, why the hell would I want to go to Brooklyn?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to go.
No, I wouldn't want to go. No, hell no.
All right. Well, what else you got, James? Or Adam, what do you got? What do you got for us? What have we not covered that you think is important for our listeners to hear about?
I will say one crab in Florida is a stone crab, and they're all claw, like small bodies, huge claws. And that's a good one, too. I mean, you can break them open, just dip them in almost anything, and they're pretty perfect.
So flavor compared to a Dungeness, better, worse, just different?
All of the above. I mean, a Dungeness is amazing. You can do that by itself. And I remember a buddy of mine and we worked at a restaurant there, and they sent us back with a bag of just Dungeness crab claws, probably, I don't know, back then, at least $500 worth of crab claws. And we came back with 5. And we just sat in the back and ate them, and we quit the next week. But it was they're good. They're well, if you have an opportunity and they're fresh, they're well worth doing. Even just lemon, and they're really good. But yeah, I mean, the ocean is definitely a haven of food for sure.
Did you guys have fish in there a lot? Did you guys have like a favorite fish to eat? Because I notice everyone who spends a lot of time down there or have lived down there, they all have something like, we really love eating this particular fish.
I would say the mahi-mahi is a good one. It's it's almost equal to the amount of like salmon. Like if you're going out, you're going to catch, and there, I mean, you could come in with 20. So there's not, at least back then, I don't know about now, but like the limit was just catch them. They're not invasive, but they're not like dying out by any means. They're not hurting on numbers. And so that was a good one. You knew you were going to catch that, I guess I should say. Everything else, you'd catch a one off of a sailfish or a wahoo or anything else, but like that was, you're catching 5 to 10 of those.
Yeah, I think those are like the fastest growing fish in the ocean, a foot a year or something like that.
And they're hard to beat because they're so versatile for cooking. I mean, you can cook them so many different
fry
ways.
them, you can do anything, bake
That's
them.
my favorite saltwater fish to eat.
They're beautiful too.
And they're a hell of a fight,
And they can be prepared so many ways.
Yeah.
And I remember we had them like nuggets.
Yeah.
Like Gal made
dolphin
them like
fingers is what they call them, which was traumatizing the first time.
Yeah, little dolphin fingers.
Yeah, and they fight. I mean, all saltwater fish fight pretty good. I've never hooked into one that didn't fight, but I think it's the mix of like the acrobatic coming out of the water thing I love about them so much, and they're just fast.
And the color variation on them, like I've seen just on pictures online, you can see some that are really blue and some that are really, really yellow. Some that have kind of some white, silver look to them.
What about like the 50-50? Have you ever seen some of those? Like I've seen pictures where like
it goes up in color.
Yeah, or horizontally, or even like front to back,
horizontally.
like half of it's blue and half of it's green. It's like, wow, that's a wild looking fish.
Well, then the cool part there was, because they're so popular, is if you catch one, you never pull it out. You make sure you hook another one because they stick around each other. And so you find a pod and you're in them.
Yeah.
The other cool thing is over there, and I don't know if you do it here, but I've never done it. But if you find like anything floating, like a weed line, or sometimes you'll see like a pontoon boat that had blown off another boat, but then they kind of start creating their own culture, where then like small fish come and then bigger, and it just turns into an ecosystem. That's if you find that, like you haul ass to that.
Like fishing an oil rig in Texas or something like that.
Yeah.
The last time I was in Mexico, where I caught one is pretty big, just trolling a plug, and we had been trolling plugs like for a couple hours after that. Like he was so big, I had to put a belt on. It was a monster, just right off his coast, And we had been trolling plugs for a couple hours, and the guide, his name's Juan Carlos, he sees this big palm frond floating in the water, and he threw some sardines. He's like, "You guys want to kill more Dorado?" And I was like, "Hell yeah,
all
we do."
day long.
Yeah, and it was, there were so many fish under that one small floating thing. It was amazing. We caught, I think, 17 the first day. And down there, it's really strange because they have a different system for fish. It's, you can keep 2 pelagics per person or 5 local fish. And it's like, I'm in a foreign country, and we all have heard horror stories about Mexican jails. And I'm like, "Hey, man, is it cool that we kill all these fish?" And he's like, "Man, this is Mexico." I'm like, "Yeah, what about the federales?" He's like, "Well, just give him some beer and stuff, dude. It's cool. Don't worry about it." And I was just like at first I'm real nervous. I'm like, well, if he says it's okay, I guess we're going to, keep doing it.
Right, or share a cell.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really nice city. It wouldn't have been that bad, but it was like an ecosystem under that one thing, which was amazing. I've never seen that living up here.
Yeah, they must move in quick like that. Last thing I was going to say was just that it all started with talking about Coasties and growing up around here. But I think that, just to reiterate, that it, for me and for most people, that it's passed down generationally. It is harder to just maybe if you didn't have that influence around or that parent. But so I'd like to give props to my dad. Just to sit when we think about these kinds of things. That and Adam too. Our dad's instilled a lot in us, and I'm sure you guys as well. I wouldn't, be half the fisherman or half the outdoorsman or half the man I am without the influence of my father. And I will say that is one thing that has given me more respect for the guys that didn't have that influence, the guys that figured it out on their own. And my dad was one of those guys. His dad didn't teach him those things. And we know a lot of guys, we've been blessed enough to have fathers that were really involved and taught us all that stuff. But, more power to you that went out and figured it out on your own. But don't forget that you don't know everything, and you can learn a lot from those around you. And, much respect for doing it on your own, but always there's something to be learned by all those people around you. And some people are lucky enough to have those people closer to them than others.
Yeah, it's well said. And we talk about this a lot. It's all about family and tradition. It's not about necessarily the outcome of that picture holding up the fish. That's the gravy on top. But if that doesn't happen, those memories with your dad, and for him too, he probably looks back at those pictures of you in those wading boots from Bi-Mart, on the riverbank with him, and all of his buddies going, "You brought your kid," but you were out there and you caught your first steelhead that way, and it's a memory you guys will always have with each other. So
I agree. I'll dovetail off of what you're both saying. Like, I just went fishing with my old man and my brother. We caught 20 walleye on the Columbia. And then 3 months before that, he took me and my daughter on a guided tour. They were all natives, so I had to let them go on the Umpqua. But,
Those are steelhead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she caught a 18-pound steelhead.
Wow.
It was a donkey.
It was.
Hey,
it was a big one.
How old's your daughter?
Just turned 14.
Yeah. So, that's a lifetime memory. An 18-pound fish, that's a
You guys see
lifetime
the picture
fish.
of
Oh,
that
my old man
That's gonna be
framed
hard
a
to
bunch
beat.
of, all of them, but that was a shining glory for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think that we're part of like a culture that's like really long, the outdoorsman, And for me, I kind of come from a broken family. So the only good memories I have are hunting and fishing with my dad. And that's really it. I'm only tough because my dad took me hunting. Like I can weather the storm literally and, theoretically sometimes when it happens to me. But those are the best memories I have, are being outside. Like the first time I ever saw an elk, like my dad called in a bull screaming, like it's stuck with me my whole life. The first big fish I ever caught, the presentation of the bait, all those little things I learned from my dad. And that's it. And we're going to do ourselves, like, that's what I like about it. It's like about family. Like, I have a kid, and I'm already getting, I mean, she's like a year and a half old, so I got a ways to go. But I'm already getting prepared for bringing her fishing and hunting.
Already like baiting lines, getting them ready.
I was talking to my dad. I work with my dad, and I said, man, you got that life jacket for my nephew? He's like, I think we got it. I'm like, do you think she's too small to put her on a boat this year? Nah, she ain't too small. Like, we'll get her on a boat.
Well, and James, you've taken your daughters out to that annual Diamond Lake fishing trip and got them going on trout fishing and stuff.
We're going June, first weekend in June. It's free fishing weekend coming up here in Oregon, for those that don't know. Free fishing weekend, first weekend in June. You can take your kids out, and we go there every year since I was in third grade. I've basically gone to Diamond Lake, and they put on a great show for the kids, and we stay in some cabins, and they do a fishing derby, and it's a blast. Yeah, so we're getting ready to do that again, and my kids have caught reeled in more rainbow trout than I did at their age.
Yeah.
My youngest is 6, and my oldest is 11, but yeah, it's a blast.
Well, and that's what it's about, is passing it on to the next generation, taking what we've gotten from our figures in our lives that have helped show us the things that we enjoy so much, and passing it on to the next generation.
Yeah, it's important because it keeps this thing going, and it keeps people interested. And I was at my parents' house this weekend. My mom was watching my daughter while I was at work, and I was just looking at some photos. I mean, some of the oldest photos we have in our family are fishing and hunting photos. My great-grandfather, God, he was probably in his 70s fishing, like fly fishing up on the Willamette by the falls. It's like, man, I told my dad, I'm like, hey, when you die, I'm going to take that picture because I want it. And he's like, well, there's one of me down a little bit farther down. Take that one, but that's what we have. And it's, it's important to keep them in it, because it's like hunters and fishing numbers have we think there's a lot of people, but overall, like, the numbers have started to come down, No one's doing it. No one will do it. That's just reality.
Yeah. And no offense to your fence on that, or your chef on that trip, but I'd rather have some sashimi than
I would have killed that thing. Was that the first big eye you ever caught?
Yeah.
Are they cool looking? I've seen pictures of them.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Did it fight hard?
Yeah. I mean, I had a rod that was made to catch anything from 500 pounds to.
Makes it easy when it's that big.
So
a broomstick.
It wasn't quite the same.
That's what I like, guys who think like that, because I'm the same way. It's like, how can I fish on this trip?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking the time. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you all in a while, so appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank you.